All right, I'm going to thank Brad for reminding me that people should probably get up and loosen up here. So go ahead and stand up, roll the shoulders out. I almost forgot. There you go, arm circles. Hopefully nobody's too hungover from last night yet. All right, and if you have a birthday on an odd number day, can you put your hands out like this? Birthday on an even number day, put your hands like this. There we go. Thank you, Brad. Now I can send my wife a message that I got a standing ovation. What's even better than that is I see the look on some of my friends' faces and they're like, oh, this shtick again. I'm not going to do it. I'm sure that there's going to be some nuggets in that picture that I probably won't be able to publicly post. All right. Dustin Thostinson, we're going to be talking about this fear of control, going from helpless to hero, techniques to tackle tech debt today. Is Laura in the room by any chance? Let's see Laura. Laura gave a great talk yesterday about a lot of very technical types of things that you can do to address tech debt. I'm going to be including some of those things. I'm also going to be including a lot of the interpersonal things, some of the things that you as a person can do to start addressing these issues and be able to start spreading that through your team and through your organization. My experience is I've been a technical person for the last couple of decades, software developer. I've done a lot of coaching, technical and leadership coaching, working from developers to executives. If there is anything that you find interesting in here today, I do have some business cards out here, and I'm taking solicitations for work. So, all right. So before I talk about the things I know, I'm going to talk about how to work. Of course. Is everything working? Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And I'm the guy that's going to be giving you technical advice here. All right, try that. Here we go. All right. Anybody been electrocuted before? I went through a stretch where I was electrocuted about a dozen times in the span of a few weeks. Anybody surprised? Yeah, I used to have hair. We moved into a new home, and I would walk into a room and kind of do the John Travolta thing where I was like, huh? When we moved, I was so used to having motion sensors in all of our rooms. Like, why would I want to have to turn a light switch on when I walked into the closet? And when we moved into the new home, there was none of that. Just these switches that I had to hit and turn on and remember to turn off. So I started going through the process of putting in motion sensors because I'm a developer, and developers are lazy. And if anybody's done electric work, you go to the breaker, you turn the breaker off, and then you come back and you have a couple of screws to take off the plate and a couple more screws, and you pull it out, and you got a black wire and a white wire. I don't remember what they're for. A little ground wire. And as long as you take them out, hook up the new switch, put it back in, turn the breaker on, come back, see if there's any smoke, see if the light is on, and you do a good job. After a few times, I'm like, oh, the breaker's all the way in the garage. So I figured if I just pull it out, I can probably just loosen the screw and pull the wire out and bend it up, and then take the other one and, slowly, not a big problem. And you're holding it every now and then, your finger will touch the other side and you get a good shock. Or one of the wires will hit the screwdriver and you get a good shock, or there's a little tension and you move things the wrong way and you get a good, I got shocked a lot. And I'm pretty sure there's been no lasting impacts. But that experience taught me something, because I was working with another guy who came over to do some 220 work at my house, and electrician, and he laughed about it because, yeah, sometimes he doesn't go to the breaker too, but I would never tell him not to do that. There are choices I can make, but I would never tell a professional, you don't have time to go to the breaker box because you got to get things done quickly. I wouldn't tell a doctor, you don't have enough time to wash your hands. I wouldn't tell an accountant, you don't have enough time to do double entry accounting, just do it right the first time. right? There are things that professionals do, and they do it for a reason because it's smart and safe. Is anybody familiar with the significance of the screws on a switch? Somewhat. These screws are perfectly aligned. If an electrician sees screws like this, they know some idiot was in there. And when they see that, they slow down. Because a true electrician will have them either perfectly vertical or horizontal. It's a sign of their craft. And if they see something different, they know to slow down and not assume anything, not assume that somebody else was good in there. They're going to take a look at it, make sure things are well, take some extra precautions. Professionals will do things to act like professionals, and they have these practices that they do things well. Really? So the point being with the professionalism is we're all professionals here, right? We're getting paid like professionals. We should be able to act like professionals. Unfortunately, oftentimes what we run into is we've got these issues where our tech debt is really slowing down our ability to deliver. It is incredibly difficult for us to be able to deliver our solutions with tech debt. The cost of change keeps going up too much, exponentially. So here, as the application gets older, you would normally see that the cost of change would start to increase. But the more crap that you get in your code base, the more mistakes, the more short-term optimizations, the more hacks that you put in there, it becomes more and more difficult to do the simple things. The red line is that ability to meet our users' needs, or the predictability of the results. So over time, they may have been able to spend this much money and this much time to get things done, but eventually that cost starts going up, the ability starts going down, and the expectations don't really change. It usually just translates into more pressure for the people doing the work, and people start trying harder and usually start making more challenges as well. By the way, I will have a QR code. You're free to take pictures. I will have the slides available on Slack after I'm done. I've got a QR code at the end of the session where you can get all of these. There'll be a bunch of links at the bottom, and there's a page with all the links as well too, but feel free to take pictures. So this is the problem that we're trying to address here, right? Our cost of change is too high. I'm going to skip this part. I was going to try to have a Q&A session, but being we're at a 45-minute slot, I'm going to try to keep going through some other things. All right, so the real question is, what is it that you can do, right? This is going to be a talk about what you can do today to help deal with this tech debt. I've run into this a lot. I've been consulting for quite a few years. I go to a lot of different teams, and oftentimes the teams feel completely helpless. They know the tech debt is the problem. They know that they're having all this pressure on them. What have you done about it? And they're like, nothing, and we're all out of ideas. Well, hopefully we're going to come up with a couple of ideas here today that'll help you with that. The first concept comes from Jerry Weinberg. Things are the way they are because they got that way. Genius. The reason I bring this up is because the first step when we're going to be dealing with these types of issues, have a little empathy, have a little compassion. I think a lot of us have been doing this. We know how things get to be the way they are. I was just talking to Edward before. You've got a marketing deadline, got to get things done. You got people coming in and dropping off code at your desk, vendors, consultants, all these other things. There's a lot of decisions that kind of lead us to where we are today. Appreciate it, learn from it. Don't spend your time trying to blame other people for it. It's in the past. We can't do anything. All we get to do is make decisions moving forward from that. This range is horrible. Integral has a really cool transformation model that I like. I'm not going to get deep into it. Again, we'll have the slides later if you'd like to go through it. But the thing that I like is they break it up into, from top to bottom, individual and collective. And this is going to be a really key concept for me, because what is it that you can do? What is it that we can do? And then you've got the span from the interior to the exterior. So if you think about any type of transformation, you're going to have the psychological things. How are you going to think about things differently? How can you view the world? That's interior. External, how can you behave? What are the things that you can do? Bottom left, when we start talking about the we, the culture, the way that we view things, I think a lot of people are aware of the problems of a culture and organization. That's a big problem to fix. How does the organization think and how do they operate? A lot of different areas to work on here, but I found that this model can be really helpful when a problem is presented, to put it in a quadrant and then say, okay, if it's up here, what can I do about it? If it's down here, what can we do about it? Going on the same kind of concept here, this circles of influence has been a very, very helpful model for me as well too. Basic concept is, at the center of this, what are the things that you can control? Next level out, what are the things that you can influence? And then finally, what are the things that are in your area of concern? We ran an experiment, and I would recommend you try this too. Ran an experiment at a company, had a bunch of whiteboards with maybe 20, 25 sticky notes on them. We had all the managers come in. We had a lot of different sticky notes. What can the team do? Can they pick their name? Can they pick the work that they do? Can they pick when the work is going to be done? Can they set their party budget? Can they set their bonus structures? Can they pick their tech stack? We had all the same questions, and we asked them of the team first, the developers, and then the managers, 2 separate sessions. How much do you think ended up in this area here for the development team? Very little. What do you think happened when we brought the managers in? Most of it. There's a huge disconnect on what the leaders thought the teams could do and what the teams thought they could do. And that gap resulted in a lot of apathy and a lot of inaction. They just assumed that the team could pick whatever name they want. And the team goes, no, but they called us Team Michigan. If you don't have any appreciation for center of control here, you're going to have a hard time making that first step. Anybody watch Glengarry Glen Ross? I'm not going to, and if you haven't watched it, please do. Please download this. It's a fabulous video. The message is good. The messaging is horrible. The basic concept, though, was that always be closing, right? Like, always be doing something to improve yourself. If I wasn't so lazy, I would have changed this to always be changing, because I think that that's something that we can commit to, right? Am I always changing? Am I always trying to find a better way to do things? The messaging in the movie is horrible. It's all the bad managerial types of things that you would see, but it is still pretty funny. We'll take a little softer approach here for self-motivation. I should have put Dustin on here just to keep it going. Always be changing. Is anybody familiar with the responsibility process well enough where they're willing to speak about it in about 30 seconds to the group? Take it.
All right, so the responsibility process is mostly about what every person goes through in going through responsibility, and responsibility being only not necessarily everything about everything, but your reactions in the way that you process going through. So starting off from denial, we deny that they exist. We shift into blaming other people for other things outside of our control or whatever. Justify and say, oh, well, I did it because of this. Going into shame and just saying, I'm bad because of this. Then we can either choose to quit or we go into obligation. Well, I have to do this now. And responsibility is the idea that we can go, well, I don't have to do this. I'm going to make a choice to do this. I'm going to make an active choice into everything.
The people in the next room think that they're clapping for me, so thank you. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the reason that we're going to talk about this is, responsibility is not accountability. It is your ability to respond. And I saw quite a few hands come up. This is a whole another area that people could dive into, but I would highly recommend you look into this concept. And then Alex mentioned, we have an ability to respond. We have an ability to make a choice and decide what to do. And that's really that closing here is, do we have your attention, do we have your interest, and have you made a decision to make a change? And then we just go into the action. But these are things that often don't happen. So if you are choosing to do something about it, if you're choosing to make some improvements, then we can start moving forward with how do we make that improvement? Do you have the will to tackle the tech debt problem? Do you have the skill? Do you know how to tackle it? If you have the will and the skill, that's great. You're going to be a pretty happy person. From our point today, I think we're going to focus on this area here, the high will and low skill. Maybe there are things that we can do additionally to build up our skill in order to tackle the tech debt problem. And if you find yourself in a hole, blame Brandon. Stop digging. So if we are in that hole of tech debt, why? Is anybody familiar with the concept of code smells? Okay, cool. So the code smells are those symptoms of poor design, right? And a lot of times when people will look at code, look at infrastructure, etc., they might be able to see it and they know that it feels wrong, but sometimes we can't really articulate it. We just point and go, ick, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about code smells here because the first step of stop digging is to be able to recognize when things are bad. Good code? Can anybody articulate what's wrong with it? Cyclomatic complexity.
Instance of checks and ifs.
Checks and ifs, good. There.
Nesting.
The nesting? Perfect. Through castings, yep. So this is, I took this out of Industrial Logic has got some training on code smells. I used to work at Industrial Logic. I was using the training to help people. And they had taken this one and they had been able to apply, here are the code smells that we have. And the idea is to be able to take a look at the duplicate code, the long methods, the inappropriate intimacy, refuse bequest. We implemented a method just because the interface said we needed to implement it. The idea here is that if you can look at code and you can articulate, you can give a name to the problem, it helps with you to be able to have clarity on what the problem is, and then to be able to figure out what you're going to do because of it. There's a PDF that Industrial Logic has as well, and again, I've got all these links later on, a free download, which says every time that you see this smell, alternative classes, combinatorial explosions, conditional complexity, data clumps, they have refactorings, and a lot of these are brought out like Martin Fowler's book. So the pattern is recognize the smell, give it a name, identify the pattern that you want to move to, and then be able to apply refactoring to get there. It's a very simple process, but it's something that you can learn better at. You can get names for these, you can teach these with your team, and then you can just start calling them out. You'll be able to see it very quickly and start building up that pattern of going from smell to a refactoring to make it better. If you're interested in books on that, Michael Feathers was here a couple of years ago, actually, speaking. Great book. Yeah. Fabulous book to read if you're a software developer. Michael was getting good at refactoring legacy code, so he thought, people are always asking me questions. If I just write a book, maybe people will quit bugging me about it. And now that he wrote a book, people bug him more. Josh Karyevsky's Refactoring the Patterns is another good book too. It really goes through all the examples of code smell, desired end state, refactorings to get there. So I've been in software for like 3 decades now. I'm going to put that up there. I do have a license for the code smells training that Industrial Logic has. They gave me a 50% off coupon code. Go ahead, enter the raffle. We'll do a drawing at the end and figure that out. But yeah, I had gone through that code smell kata, gone through the training and just kept working at it, every day, half hour, every day, every morning, going through it, recognizing. So when we got better at the code, we could point to it and give it the names, and that was a shortcut for us to being able to move forward on it. I'm probably not, I'll give one quick example of a code smell, temporal coupling. This is a really, really popular one that I see happening. When you're reading your code, Jack's nodding his head, you can kind of read what the developer and the product owner were thinking. Do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then, and then, and then, and then, and you see that through the code. And when they have a new and then, you just put it in there, and here, and here, and here. So the concept of cohesion is that things that change together stay together. With temporal coupling, if you find yourself going through the code where you're saying this, and then, and then, and then, and then, and you keep finding yourself calling out to different areas, maybe you can revisit that approach and leverage different things of the framework, perhaps eventing, to be able to still have the and then story, but still organize your code. I'm kind of embarrassed how long I've been a developer before I heard of the concept temporal coupling. And once I saw it, I finally had a name for what I was feeling. And because of that, I knew what to do about that. The logging and the validation and the database saves. The product A work, the product B work. Yes, they were all happening when a person clicked that button on the UI, but they don't have to all be happening in a linear sequence in the application. So as we talk about attacking this technical debt, one of my favorite concepts from Kent Beck, make the change easy, then make the easy change. So how do I make that change easy? I practice. So martial arts, they've got the concept of kata. Blocking the forms, right? Blocking, kicking, punching. You do these things over and over and over, so it becomes muscle memory. So when you need to block, you block immediately. You don't have to think, what is the angle of their arm coming at me? You just block, you just react. For software developers, I'd highly recommend you take the time to do katas. Gilded Rose is a great example. It's an ugly piece of code, and all of the little things that you have to do to make it clean are things worth practicing so you don't think about it. The nested ifs that we were looking at before. I'm guessing some of you are thinking in your head the keyboard shortcut to expand the selection, extract a method, give it a name, and set it aside. The Gilded Rose kata, and there's plenty others out there. Emily Beisch, I don't have it right here, but I do have the link, has a ton of them. But if you go through that practice, if you're focusing the attention on your behaviors, then when you're actually really writing production code, you're doing these things well. It's like practicing the basketball shots and the dribbling in practice. You don't think about that during a game. Usually in software development, we're trying to solve a production problem. We're thinking about the problem. We're not thinking about how we solve it, and we beat the hell out of our mouse. So build up your own skills to make it easy to do these technical refactorings, and then you don't have to think about them as much. You have the cue kick in. You're building your good habits. You see the problem in the code. You've been practicing this, so you go through your routine, keyboard shortcut, extract method, extract variable, rename, move, etc. You do the thing you need to do, and you get the reward because all of a sudden the code looks a little bit better. Maybe you can scan it very quickly now and see what's going on instead of having to slowly read it and think. One of my favorite things to do now is refactoring. I would love to just take code and rip it apart and clean it up. It is so rewarding. From the mantra of make it work, make it right, make it fast, refactoring is a huge part of that. So try to get used to doing that very well for yourself. You're going to have the big old messy code bases and you're going to tangle with it and you might get some area cleaned up, but there's always going to be much left to do. And that's okay though, you're making some improvement here. Going through that practice repeatedly gets better. All right, so we're going to look a little bit more at the team level now. What are things you can do as a team? I've heard this concept talked about multiple times this conference already. Whatever you think that they're doing for your Scrum teams, probably wrong. The Scrum Guide says, the resulting plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. The whole Scrum team then collaborates to define a sprint goal. The backlog is a plan by and for the developers. If you think you're suffering from tech debt because the stakeholders, the product owners, the Scrum Masters won't approve your tech debt work, that's wrong. There's nothing inherent in the design of Scrum, and I'm not trying to be a proponent for Scrum. I'm just saying the things that people do is often different from what it was designed to do. You have the ability to make choices on that. You have the ability to build your team up. I worked with a bunch of teams, and each of them would spend 2 hours a week working together as a team. Some of them looked at the schedule and they wanted to do 2 hours at one block. Great. Other team, they figured, you know what, we got everybody at stand-up. How about we meet 15 minutes, 30 minutes before stand-up, and let's get all together and work together so we can work together better as a team. Another team had their meetings all over the place, and they realized that on Tuesdays and Thursdays they had 11 a.m. to noon open. That kind of sucked, because as soon as you would get into your problem, it's lunchtime. So what they just decided to do is they said, you know, as long as we're together from our planning session, let's work together a little bit. Let's take that gilded rose kata and start working together as a team. A lot of times we hear this whole concept of divide and conquer. We want to be efficient. We want to optimize the team works. So we'll take our story, we'll split it all up, and then we'll put it all together at the end. That works, right? I'm alone up here.
This is step.
This step?
The integration.
Yeah, the integration. It's funny how often people forget what CI means. Continuous integration. Usually this whole divide and conquer approach does not work well. Managers will talk to somebody else, pull them off on a production issue, give them a pet project. A defect will come up in an area, somebody goes on vacation. There's all these reasons why this whole divide and conquer or scatter-gather model just doesn't work. So if we're talking about getting the teams working together better, what are some things that we could do? Do we want to keep having PRs where people don't have any context on what we're doing? That doesn't always seem to work so well. Or do we want to find a way to get the team working together well? Anybody do mob programming ensemble? Yeah? Great. How's it working?
I don't like it.
Good? Good, good. I'm glad to see so many people doing that now. Like paired programming, mob programming is where the whole team gets involved. And with paired programming, a lot of people didn't like it because it was inflicted on them. And with mob programming, some people go, oh man, that's not efficient at all. You got all these people just sitting back watching Travis do all the coding. Well, if you don't want to do that for your regular work, try it out for your code katas. Get people together. And all those reasons why you don't think that it would work well, You got people who are slow typers. They don't know the keyboard shortcuts. They don't know how to do the string parsing. They can't organize the code base, right? Like all those things that are not working well on your team, that's why you practice together. You want your team to be stronger. You want your team to work well together. You want to be able to rely on them. You don't want to just have, the one great developer and then everybody else kind of scattered around. You want the team to get stronger together. If you do that during the katas and you can figure out how to articulate what you're thinking, which a lot of us aren't good at, if you can say what you're thinking and not just have to type it, now the team can work a little bit better. It's a good practice. And there can be different levels. You've got your driver, the person who's writing the code. The person who writes the code doesn't think about it. The navigator has the ideas and tells the driver what to do. The mobbers on the team are paying attention to what's going on, keeping their contexts up, and maybe they're thinking about the other types of things that should happen. What are we going to do next? The basic idea is if you have an idea, your idea can't go into the code. It has to go through somebody else's fingers. I've got a couple members of a team I worked with last year here, and when we would mob together, it was actually fun because we had to do documentation and we had to have scripts, and there's a lot of other things that we would do. So as we would work together, we would take turns saying, you're doing that thing over and over. You're killing the Docker image, you're pulling it up, you're resetting the database. What if we just wrote a shell script for it? Somebody's showing us something to do. People would start grabbing screenshots and putting them in our documentation, so then we would have the things that we needed later. It wasn't write the code, test the code, deploy the code. We were thinking about all those things at once, and we were able to do all the work, so when we were done, we were done. If somebody's asking about a regular expression or string parsing request, the navigator says, yeah, go ahead and split on that. And if somebody doesn't know how to do it, cool, you're the Googler in chief. Pull it up. So when these two don't know how to implement something, that person already has Stack Overflow up and said, here's the article, read this. If you're doing a kata, I would recommend you switch every 5 minutes. You get a team of 5 people, that means that each person gets to touch the keyboard about twice an hour, right? And if the switching is uncomfortable, good. Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad. But yeah, a lot of different roles here. You can have the person who's looking for code smells as people are fixing it, people automating. There's a lot of things that you can do to stay active instead of just sitting back and watching Brandon write all the code. And if as a team you're overwhelmed, you're saying there's just so many things for us to fix, where do we go? There are some scripts out there that will go through your code base and will spit out a nice little thing which talks about the churn, how often specific files are being edited, and the complexity, how nasty are those files. So I wouldn't recommend that you try to fix all of the things, but if you've got a hit list of things that seem to be changing frequently because everybody is in there and they're big and ugly, seems like a great place to start breaking it apart. And another thing, my last thought on teams is, if you get overwhelmed with all of the stuff that you have to do, maybe have a theme of the week. Pick one thing. Maybe we're going to look at globals. And if we've got a problem where we've got global variables all throughout the code, maybe when you get into a method, take that global and introduce it as a parameter. Extract some of the stuff out. Maybe you'll get a static method out of the deal. And you can put that in a static class, and now that's completely functional, right? But find a couple of things that you could do. Maybe they decide to have a theme of factory patterns. Maybe you recognize that you're instantiating objects all over the place, and we just say, guess what, this week, if you're in the code and you see something that should be pulled out into a factory, do it. But keep the changes small, but keep them going continuously. And as you're looking at your code, think about how to break it up. I like the car stereo analogy. I worked at an auto manufacturer, and this one seemed to resonate with them. Their code base was such that every time they changed the oil, they'd had to check to see if the CD player still worked. So we worked on being able to isolate their pieces in order to be able to test that independently. I should be able to test the car stereo, make sure that I push the radio button for 3 seconds to set a preset, make sure the CD player works. I should be able to test that thing in isolation, so if I make small changes, I get very quick feedback. At another company, we ended up having a big old website, and they were able to take a piece. I know that you're going to get disgusted at me for using the word iframe, but what they had found is that by having iframes for their component, they were able to build their component in isolation, test their component in isolation, and then when they plugged it into the website, they just had to make sure things worked. You put the car stereo in the car, you're going to make sure that it turns on when the power goes on, the speakers work with the steering wheel controls, etc. You don't need to test all of the things. You get that fast feedback. So if you have to, take a look at your pipelines. If you say that you can't get fast feedback because you have this big old pipeline doing all these types of things, and every time you make a code change, it's going to take 2 hours, break it up. I was talking to the guys from Circle CI. They said that they can declare, if you make a branch of your code for a few hours, that you can pick which tests to run off of that. They've got the policies. So if you can isolate your things, you can test them independently. If it works on the small, then it can work on the large, and you don't have to waste time running a bunch of tests that you don't need to test. You can question these things. Just because somebody had set it up doesn't mean it's static and forever. You have to look for those opportunities to continue to isolate so you can do that. I'm going to skip that example here. And now we'll talk about the stakeholders in our last few minutes here. When I first learned of the Peter Principle, I used it as a weapon. That stupid manager, they're all Peter Principled out. People are promoted to their level of incompetence. Later on, I started having more compassion for people. I recognize I'm not going to blame that person for not being competent. I'm going to be compassionate with them because they're in a position where they're probably in a hierarchy where all the shit flows downhill. And they're doing their best, but they might not be prepared for the situation. So now, what can I do to help that person out more? This is where we kind of get into more of the soft skills of that whole TechDebt issue. Consulting may be defined as the art of influencing someone at their request. I first read this book 15 years ago when I went independent. Tim Gifford told me to read it. I read that book again 5 or 10 years later, and it made a lot more sense. Just because you have all the answers, it doesn't mean that you can just inflict them on people. That doesn't work. You have to influence them at their request. You've got to find ways to visualize the work. If you want to do refactoring, have a new column in your Kanban for pre-factoring. Make the change easy, then make the easy change. Learn how to use Jira for your own good. I've done this before. So if our normal, and this is kind of a hacky CFD, but if we've got 20 elements here, over time, when we keep just making the change, the amount of time takes longer. However, if you set up a pre-factoring column in Kanban, you can capture how much time in red here we have to make that change, and then take a look at how much it takes to actually change the thing that you want to do. Think about the PR process. What if you just keep submitting a bunch of little PRs and just say refactoring? They're not looking at that point for logic errors. If the tests still pass and the code looks better, the before and after, cool, go with it. And now after you've done all those refactoring changes, when you submit the real thing, pretty concise. They don't have to think about all the different things. Over time, the amount of refactoring goes down, and the changes that you make go down. The rate at which you actually deliver will go up. This is real data that you can use today. Add it, track it, show it. You're giving them the information to help them figure out how things are working. You can take all the stories and dump them out into Excel as well. And then you can start calculating. Here's where I was calculating dev time efficiency. For the life of a story, how much time is actually being under real development? 19%, 32%, 70% waste. right? Here's some of the information that you can give them to help them out. You can limit your WIP, your work in progress. Every time you change context, 20% of your time is spent thrashing, context switching. So if you're working on two things, 20% of your time is going to be spent on context switching. That is cumulative. If you're on 5 different things, you may spend up to 80% of your time just jumping around, putting this down, picking that up. Help your managers out. Tell them to give you that big brown umbrella and protect you so you can focus on the things that you're trying to do, because there's math behind it, Little's law. If you reduce the WIP, you increase your throughput. It's simple math. Apply Little's law. Reduce the WIP, increase throughput, increase your focus, get more stuff done overall. Be happier. Not all data is going to work. Has anybody ever seen a manager make a decision based off of Sonar Cube? You have? All right, I got one now. Sometimes Sonar Cube is good to be able to have an objective reflection of what the code looks like. A lot of times it might get to be a little bit too technical, where the manager's like, they don't care, they just want you to deliver. But think about some of the different options that you have with that. And as you're going through it, don't necessarily try to take a big bang approach. I've seen people take 3 months off, stop all development, and fix their tech debt. Yeah. And then things were still crap, right? So instead of a big bang, go for a bunch of little bangs. It's easier to sell. Work on the things that you need to do, your pipeline, your skills, your practices. Work on those types of things, and then continue to carve that out. Boy Scout rule, leave it better than you found it. And if you're worried about the influencing, if you've got the hierarchies, figure out who talks to who. And if you can talk to one person who might be able to influence another person that can influence the other person, understand what that looks like. I know as technologists, we don't want to get into the politics game, but if you can get a crisp and clear message, which somebody later corrected me to be succinct, maybe you don't have to have the most words, but you have the best ideas. Maybe you can communicate in such a way where you don't have to talk about all the information or all the relationships, but you can think about it enough to say, here's where we're starting, here's where we're going, give a very nice, by the way, this is my favorite diagram, have a nice clear message to get there, because if you can describe what you're trying to do like this, even though you understand it like this, you're going to get a lot more buy-in. If you talk to people in this level, you're going to lose them. Keep it simple, give a simple message to the people around you, and you will hear it come back to you from other people. My last engagement, I was talking about the concept of impact and intent when we were talking about people. Was it the person's intent to do that, or was that just the impact that they had? The interesting thing is, as I mentioned that to a couple of people, days later, I had other people who I had not introduced that concept to, talking to me very confidently about intent and impact. If you know where you're trying to go, get a good message. Make sure that other people can share the message. You will have that influence on the organization, and you will start getting the results that you want. That has nothing to do with my presentation, but it's just too darn cute. All right. And finally, the proof is in the pudding, right? So it's like, the bottom line is you have to be able to deliver on these types of results, and you have to find all those changes. Keep on changing. Always be changing. All right, we've got it. Wow, 13 seconds. Any questions? All right, let me see real quick here if we did get anybody for the drawing. Did I get that or not? All right, last chances here. So we got Brent, Dan, Zach. I don't know who that person is. Did anybody else want to get into the drawing? Oh, we got a few here. This is the wrap, huh? All right, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 will go. All right, if I don't have your name on here, I can't have you win though. All right, so let me go back up to the top. We'll just number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for Ethan, 7 for Kyle, 8 for Nara. All right, and this is impossible to look at here. No, we'll just do 1 from 10 here. 7. 7's our winner. I've lost already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6. Kyle, you're number 7. Coming up, and I'll give you the reference. Again, my cards are at the end of the table here. Oh, I did want to make one more pause, just out of appreciation here. This morning I found out that former CIO and manager of mine, Terry Pitcher, had passed away this last week. I don't know, has anybody worked with Terry? Yeah, wonderful woman. I look back, this Agile thing's been going on in Des Moines for 20 years now. Terry was the CIO at ITA Group when she allowed people to start doing this Agile thing. And that's where Tim Gifford were, that's where I was. We had a lot of like fabulous people there. So she made a lot of good things happen, so. All right, I've got cards at the end of the table. If you want to reach out to me, if you've got any job offers, please do. Thank you very much for coming. Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. Shoot, back here. Here's all the references. Thank you for the reminder. What do you mean? You can use mine if you want.
We don't have a